Welcome back to Required Reading. I'm Russ, and today we're going to continue our read of Ghostbusters The Return. This is Chapter 11. Venkman sat in the back of the black limousine and stared out the window. Outside, the bright neon lights of every color were beginning their daily battle against the gathering darkness that came with the evening. The limo's progress was slow, thanks to the rush hour traffic, which was in full swing. The fact that the midtown streets were clogged with cars, buses, and assorted vehicles was bad enough, but teeming masses of pedestrians were also crossing the streets on their way home, sometimes obeying the stoplights, sometimes not, which brought traffic to a virtual standstill. When you put it all together, it was no wonder that Venkman's limo was inching along. With luck, it managed to move a car length or two during each green signal, before the light cycled back to red, and the long line of cars in front of the limo sat still once again. This was going to take a while. Not that Venkman gave any sign of noticing. He stared blankly past the signs and crowds, lost in thought. "Hey," said a quiet voice beside him. "Penny for your thoughts." It took a second for the words to penetrate, but then he turned with a smile. "You'd be overpaying." "You're really off in your own world there," said Dana. "What are you thinking about?" "Huh? Oh, nothing." She raised a skeptical eyebrow. "Nobody goes that quiet and spends that much time staring into space without thinking about something." "No? How about coma patients?" "Fine. You don't go that quiet and spend that much time staring into space without thinking about something." Venkman gestured dismissively. It was nothing. Just guy stuff, you know? Football, scratching, that kind of thing." "Hey, did I mention how beautiful you look tonight?" Dana smiled. "All right, I get it. You don't want to talk about it." In fact, despite Venkman's obvious attempt to change the subject, he really did mean the compliment, since they were creeping along toward a black-tie dinner at the Museum of Modern Arts, or MoMA, as it was more properly known to the locals. Both of them were looking their best. Venkman wore an overcoat over a simple but stylish black tuxedo. Dana was wearing a short black jacket over a shimmering black evening gown that was cut low both in front and in back. The dinner was a fundraiser to benefit a new gallery for the museum. Venkman knew nothing about modern art, but he was scheduled to deliver a supportive speech over dinner. Given the dinner's $1,000-a-plate price tag and Mayor Lipinski's legendary talent for cutting funds for the arts, it was a perfect opportunity for him to connect with an audience that was both powerful and sympathetic. All in all, the evening promised to be a slam dunk. He'd have them eating out of his hand by the time they brought around the coffee. What was equally important, from Venkman's perspective, was the fact that he was allowed to bring a date. Dana loved art. After Oscar was born, she'd even worked part-time restoring antique paintings while she was on maternity leave from the symphony. It had been ages since she had been to the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Somehow she couldn't bring herself to go back to the Met after the ghost of a Carpathian dictator tried to steal her baby from her there. But MoMA was no problem. MoMA was a very different art museum with a very different sort of collection, but it provided a good alternative. Venkman was glad for the opportunity to impress her with a fancy dinner for a change, especially if it was in a place that she liked. Besides, what with the election, the Ghostbusters, and Dana, it was getting harder and harder for Venkman to juggle all of the many demands on his time. It seemed as though everyone wanted something from him these days. Each time he tried to give some attention to one part of his life, it meant letting the others drop. At least the chance to campaign and go on a date simultaneously meant that he could tend to two sides of his life at the same time. It was a real blessing. Or it would have been, if he could pull himself out of the funk that he'd been in all afternoon. "You're doing it again," Dana said. Venkman shook himself from the reverie. No, I'm listening, really. Every word. Dana looked amused. That's funny. I didn't say anything. Venkman only hesitated for an instant. You see? That's how much I pay attention to you. I start listening before you even start talking. Dana tossed her head back and chuckled in amazement. You're really just totally shameless, aren't you? Who? Me? He said, putting on an expression of complete innocence. I prefer to think of it as endearing. She sat up and laid her hand on his. You know, if you tell me what's bothering you, I'll listen. I might even be able to help. Venkman studied her for a minute. Dana really did want to help him, and it was yet another reason why he loved... Well, it meant a lot to him, anyway. But what could he say? That his life was getting too complicated? That people were expecting too much from him? That he was being stretched in a million different directions, and he couldn't be everything to everyone? There wasn't a whole lot that Dana could do about any of that, other than offering to drop out of his life herself, and that was the last thing he ever wanted to do. It would be too high a price to pay. No, it was better to say nothing at all. He'd figure out a way to deal with it all and keep everyone happy. Besides, he thought, it's not like this is going to go on forever. Once the campaign was over and he was in office, everything would be better. He could hire the Ghostbusters back at a substantial increase in pay to make up for their troubles. In fact, he could give himself a big raise, too, to make up for his own troubles. And with a staff in place to handle his work for him, he'd be able to spend more time with Dana. All he had to do was weather the next couple of months of campaigning, and then life could go back to normal. Peter, he sighed. It's nothing, really. Look, I just had this stupid fight with Ray today. With Ray? What about? Something stupid. It doesn't matter. The point is, I tried to lay it on him, but it was really all my fault. So I'm feeling like kind of an idiot right now. He could see Dana's body relax, relieved that it wasn't anything more serious. She gave his hand a reassuring squeeze. He's your best friend, Peter. He'll forgive you. Yeah, I know. I'll call him tomorrow. She leaned over and gave him a peck on the cheek. You're a good friend. He responded by leaning in as well and kissing her lightly on the lips. Thanks. They kept their faces close together for a moment, exchanging smiles and silent gazes. Venkman felt so much for this woman who cared so much for him. There had to be something he could do to show her that he felt the same way. They kissed lightly one more time and settled back into their seats, still holding hands. So, I was thinking, he said, in a couple of weeks, when I get over the initial hump of this campaign thing, maybe I can finally take Butch to the Museum of Natural History to see those dinosaurs. Dana raised a hand. Let's not start that again. No, I mean it. I know I let you guys down on that one, and I want to make up for it. Peter, you're never going to have time to take Oscar to the museum while you're running for mayor. No sweat. I'll work it out. Besides, it'll be good for the campaign. It'll bring in the dinosaur vote. Oh, really? Sure, most people don't realize it, but dinosaurs are a vital underappreciated minority in New York. Dana chuckled. All right. Well, how about this? I'll take Oscar to see some of the dinosaur skeletons tomorrow. He'll be happy, and it'll take the pressure off. Then, whenever your schedule permits, we can all go together to see the rest of them. Venkman threw up his hands. And she has brains, too. You're just now realizing that? No, of course not, he said, sliding over to put his arms around her. From the first moment I saw you, that was what attracted me. Your brains. Really? Absolutely. You're gorgeous, he kissed her. Gorgeous, he kissed her again. Brains. He kissed her a third time. They spent the better part of a block that way, until the MoMA building finally came into view. Reluctantly, they had to separate at that point so that they could touch up their appearances and look presentable when they arrived. As they fixed their hair and straightened their clothes, she caught his eye. "Feeling better?" she asked. "After that? Oh, yeah." "That's not what I meant." "I know," he said. "Yeah, I'm okay." "Good. Listen, thanks for telling me what was going on between you and Ray. I know it's not easy for you to talk honestly about your feelings, but I'm glad you did." "Yeah," said Venkman. "Me too." Egon just couldn't keep his eyes open anymore. Slowly, the parchment began to slip from his fingers. His head began to droop and fall forward, until he caught himself and woke with a start. He shook his head, adjusted his glasses, and looked quickly around at his surroundings to orient himself. He saw familiar office areas, the piles of ancient books stacked on the table, and Ray paging through yet another volume at the far side of the table. "Oh, right," he thought. With a yawn, Egon rolled up his sleeve to check his watch. It read 3:16 a.m. He turned his attention back to the Egyptian scroll in front of him. He opened his eyes wide, gave his head another shake, and tried to go back to searching through the hieroglyphics for some mention of Xanthador. Ordinarily, he wasn't bad at deciphering the ancient symbols. Back in college, he once translated 16 dirty limericks into hieroglyphics as a favor to his childhood friend, Peter Venkman, so that Venkman could write them on bathroom walls. At the moment, though, Egon's sleep-starved brain was having trouble focusing on the task at hand. His thoughts kept drifting away. Eye, scarab, water, ibis, walking man, he thought. Eye, ibis, water, I before ibis, except after C. A scarab and an ibis walk into a man. He woke again with a jolt and checked his watch. 3:20. "Ray, let's call it a night," he said. "Just a little longer," Ray said. "It's almost 3:30. "It is?" "Yes." Ray thought about it for a second, then went back to his book. "We've got to nail this thing." "I agree, but I can't stay awake any longer, and you fell off your chair half an hour ago." "That was just a touch of vertigo." "Due to the remarkable height of your chair, I assume," Egon replied dryly. "I admire your dedication, but you're no good to anyone like this. Let's pick up again in the morning." "The sooner we find something on Xanthador, the sooner we can put an end to all this." "Yes, but operating at a diminished capacity isn't going to help. We'll come back to it in the morning. Janine and Lewis can keep checking the English language sources too." "What if there's another attack by then? Someone could die." "And it will be you. You won't be able to save anyone if you don't get a few hours of sleep first. Or do you think it's a good idea to operate a proton pack when you're semi-conscious?" Ray started to say something in response, but stopped himself. "Okay," he said. "You win. But just a few hours." "Fine." Ray placed a bookmark inside the book he was reading and closed the cover. "You want to crash upstairs? Your old bed's open." "That sounds good." The two of them walked around the room, turning off lights and trying not to stumble over their own tired feet. But when Egon went to turn off the lamp on Janine's desk, he noticed something. "Did you leave the phone off the hook?" Egon asked. "Not as far as I know. Maybe it got knocked over while we were dealing with the ghosts." Egon picked up the fallen receiver and held it up to his ear. An electronic voice on the other end was saying, "Ling, Zing, Dishon, she..." With a puzzled look, Egon said, "It's a recording. It sounds like Chinese. Chinese? I think so. Ray groaned. Giving the correct time, right? Could be. Did you call? Ray shook his head. Urban legend. A woman gets even with her ex after a messy breakup by using his phone to dial the phone number for their correct time to China? Ray nodded. It's bad enough they tried to kill us, but they want to drive up our phone bill, too?